نحن نصلي على محمد وآل محمد.
اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. اللهم إني أسألك وأتوجه إليك بنبيك نبي الرحمة محمد صلى الله عليه وآله. يا أبا القاسم يا رسول الله، يا إمام الرحمة، يا سيدنا ومولانا، إنا توجهنا واستشفعنا وتوسلنا بك إلى الله، وقدمناك بين يدي حاجاتنا يا وجيها عند الله، اشفع لنا عند الله. يا أبا الحسن يا أمير المؤمنين، يا علي بن أبي طالب، يا حجة الله على خلقه، يا سيدنا ومولانا، إنا توجهنا واستشفعنا وتوسلنا بك إلى الله، وقدمناك بين يدي حاجاتنا يا وجيها عند الله، اشفع لنا عند الله. يا فاطمة الزهراء يا بنت محمد، يا قرة عين الرسول، يا سيدتنا ومولاتنا، إنا توجهنا واستشفعنا وتوسلنا بك إلى الله، وقدمناك بين يدي حاجاتنا يا وجيهة عند الله اشفعي لنا عند الله. يا أبا محمد يا حسن بن علي أيها المجتبى يا ابن رسول الله يا حجة الله على خلقه يا سيدنا ومولانا إنا توجهنا واستشفعنا وتوسلنا بك إلى الله وقدمناك بين يدي حاجاتنا يا وجيها عند الله اشفع لنا عند الله. يا أبا عبد الله يا حسين بن علي أيها الشهيد يا ابن رسول الله يا حجة الله على خلقه يا سيدنا ومولانا إنا توجهنا واستشفعنا وتوسلنا بك إلى الله وقدمناك بين يدي حاجاتنا يا وجيها عند الله اشفع لنا عند الله. يا أبا الحسن يا علي بن الحسين يا زين العابدين يا ابن رسول الله يا حجة الله على خلقه يا سيدنا ومولانا إنا توجهنا واستشفعنا وتوسلنا بك إلى الله وقدمناك بين يدي حاجاتنا يا وجيها عند الله اشفع لنا. يا أبا جعفر يا محمد بن علي أيها الباقر يا ابن رسول الله يا حجة الله على خلقه يا سيدنا ومولانا إنا توجهنا واستشفعنا وتوسلنا بك إلى الله وقدمناك بين يدي حاجاتنا يا وجيها اشفع لنا عند الله. يا أبا عبد الله يا جعفر بن محمد أيها الصادق يا ابن رسول الله يا حجة الله على خلقه يا سيدنا ومولانا إنا توجهنا واستشفعنا وتوسلنا بك إلى الله وقدمناك بين يدي حاجاتنا يا وجيها عند الله اشفع لنا عند الله. يا أبا الحسن يا موسى بن جعفر أيها الكاظم يا ابن رسول الله يا حجة الله على خلقه يا سيدنا ومولانا إنا توجهنا واستشفعنا وتوسلنا بك إلى الله وقدمناك بين يدي حاجاتنا يا وجيها عند الله اشفع لنا. يا أبا الحسن يا علي بن موسى، أيها الرضا يا ابن رسول الله، يا حجة الله على خلقه، يا سيدنا ومولانا، إنا توجهنا واستشفعنا وتوسلنا بك إلى الله، وقدمناك بين يدي حاجاتنا يا وجيها عند الله، اشفع لنا. يا أبا جعفر يا محمد بن علي، أيها التقي الجواد يا ابن رسول الله، يا حجة الله على خلقه، يا سيدنا ومولانا، إنا توجهنا واستشفعنا وتوسلنا بك إلى الله، وقدمناك بين يدي حاجاتنا يا وجيها عند الله، اشفع لنا عند الله. يا أبا الحسن يا علي بن محمد، أيها الهادي النقي يا ابن رسول الله، يا حجة الله على خلقه، يا سيدنا ومولانا، إنا توجهنا واستشفعنا وتوسلنا بك إلى الله، وقدمناك بين يدي حاجاتنا يا وجيها اشفع لنا عند الله. يا أبا محمد يا حسن بن علي، أيها الزكي العسكري يا ابن رسول الله، يا حجة الله على خلقه، يا سيدنا ومولانا، إنا توجهنا واستشفعنا وتوسلنا بك إلى الله، وقدمناك بين يدي حاجاتنا يا وجيها عند الله، اشفع لنا. يا وصي الحسن والخلف الحجة، أيها القائم المنتظر المهدي يا ابن رسول الله، يا حجة الله على خلقه، يا سيدنا ومولانا، إنا توجهنا واستشفعنا وتوسلنا بك إلى الله، وقدمناك بين يدي حاجاتنا يا وجيها عند الله، اشفع لنا عند الله يا وجيها عند الله، اشفع لنا عند الله يا وجيها عند الله، اشفع لنا. حاجات. يا سادتي وموالي إني توجهت بكم أئمتي وعدتي ليوم فقري وحاجتي إلى الله وتوسلت بكم إلى الله واستشفعت بكم إلى الله فاشفعوا لي عند الله واستنقذوني من ذنوبي عند الله فإنكم وسيلتي إلى الله وبحبكم وبقربكم أرجو نجاة من الله فكونوا عند الله رجائي يا سادتي يا أولياء الله صلى الله عليهم أجمعين ولعن الله أعداء الله ظالميهم من الأولين والآخرين آمين رب العالمين.
اللهم صل على محمد وعلى آل محمد.
الفاتحة.
The Common Wise Counselor. کربلا حسین کے غم کو نہ بھلانا اے کربلا حسین کے غم کو نہ بھلانا ورنہ تجھے بھی سارا بھلا دے گا زمانہ اے کربلا حسین کے غم کو نہ بھلانا تجھ کو کیا ہے کرب و بلا کس نے مولا تجھ کو کیا ہے کرب و بلا کس نے مولا یہ خون ہے رسول کا اس کو نہ چھپانا اے کربلا حسین کے غم کو نہ بھلانا ان ریت کے اڑتے ہوئے ذرات سے کہنا ان ریت کے اڑتے ہوئے ذرات سے کہنا اصغر کی یہی خبر ہے اس کو نہ مٹانا اے کربلا حسین کے غم کو نہ بھلانا کیسے ننگے پاؤں چلی کس طرح زینب خیمے سے ننگے پاؤں چلی کس طرح زینب یہ بات علمدار کو ہرگز نہ بتانا اے کربلا حسین کے غم کو نہ بھلانا بالوں سے رخ چھپائے ہوئے جاتی ہے زینب، بالوں سے رخ چھپائے ہوئے جاتی ہے زینب، اے تیز ہوا ان کو نہ چہرے سے ہٹانا، اے کربلا حسین کے غم کو نہ بھلانا، پیاسا ہے 3 روز کا ننھالی اصغر، پیاسا ہے 3 روز کا ننھالی اصغر، پانی کے عوض تیر سے اس کو نہ سلانا، اے کربلا حسین کے غم کو نہ بھلانا، کس طرح جائے شام کے بازار میں زینب، کس طرح جائے شام کے بازار میں زینب، سرننگے نبی زادی ہے چادر توڑانا، اے کربلا حسین کے غم کو نہ بھلانا، ورنہ تجھے بھی سارا بھلا دے گا زمانہ، اے کربلا حسین کے غم کو نہ بھلانا، محمد وآل محمد صلی اللہ علیہ وسلم۔
Mu'mineen, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Our condolences from all of the Mu'mineen to the Imam of our time on the occasion of the Shahadat of his beloved father, our 11th Holy Imam, Imam Hassan al Askari alayhi salam. This weekend, inshallah, the Al-Mahdi Health Committee have arranged a pop-up vaccination clinic to enable people to get their autumn booster COVID vaccination. The clinic will also be open to members of the public. The following groups will be able to come and get vaccinated: those aged over 50, frontline healthcare workers and social care workers, those who are immunocompromised or carers of those who are immunocompromised, and anyone aged 12 and above who has not had both of their initial 2 vaccinations. There is no appointment required, and so you can simply drop in for a vaccination. We are in need of some volunteers for the day. If you are able to volunteer, then please do contact Sister Marsia. Can I please request the recitation of Surah Al-Fatiha for the marhumeen of those who have provided the Tabarruk for this evening, Surah Al-Fatiha. Can I please ask you to join me in welcoming Shaykh Abbas for the Majlis this evening with the recitation of 3 loud salawats ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad.
الفاتحة لأرواح المؤمنين والمؤمنات. أعوذ بالله السميع العليم من الشيطان اللعين الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله والحمد حقه كما يستحقه حمدا كثيرا. الحمد لله رب العالمين الأول قبل أولية الأولين والباقي بعد فناء العالمين. ثم الصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين سيدنا ونبينا أبي القاسم محمد. اللهم صل على محمد وعلى آله الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين المظلومين الذين أذهب الله عنهم الرجس وطهرهم تطهيرا. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. قال الله تبارك وتعالى وقوله الحق: أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. وما أرسلنا من رسول إلا ليطاع بإذن الله. آمنا بالله صدق الله العلي العظيم. صلوات. اللهم صل على محمد. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. Mu'mineen, we have all joined tonight to be able to present our most deepest sympathies and condolences to the Imam of our time, the awaited Sayyid Imam al-Mahdi al-Hujja Ajjallahu Farajahu al-Sharif. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad. And also to the ulama kiram and maraja idam and the ummah of the Ahlul Bayt followers on the said occasion of the loss of the father of our beloved Imam al-Asr. We pray to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that by the wasila of the Ahlul Bayt alayhimus salam, in tonight being the final days of drawing close to the end of the day of Azadari, that may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala accept our efforts for Azadari and bless us insha'Allah with that life and tawfiq to be able to once again be able to give life to the first year of Adha, and our condolences to the grieving mother, Sayyidah Fatima Zahra alayha salam. Salawat. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa Muhammad. In our Majlis tonight, insha'Allah, I would like to dwell on to two sections. The first section is with regard to the discussion which we had on the previous Majlis when we observed the wafat of Sayyidah Fatima bint Musa al-Kadhim, salawatullahi wa salamu alayhima. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. And thereafter to dwell into the second section, which is the wafat of our 11th Imam, and relate it to the Azadari of Abu Abdullah Hussein alayhi salam, especially with regards to the observance of Arba'in. You will recall that when we were discussing about the lofty status of Sayyidah Fatima bint al-Musa al-Kadhim, whom we commonly call as Ma'asuma al-Qum, we mentioned that this name of Ma'asuma, the one who is infallible, the lady who is infallible, was given to her by none other than her brother, our 8th Imam Ali ibn Musa al-Rida, salawatullahi wa salamu alayhi. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad. Where the Imam mentioned, Manzar al-Ma'asuma bi kummin ka manzarani. One who does the ziyarah of Ma'asuma, the lady who is infallible, gets the reward equivalent as having done my ziyarah. And you will recall you are discussing about the excellence and the lofty status of this lady, that all these fadail were mentioned at times even before her birth by the sixth Imam, and now this fadail of her being called Ma'asuma, is the lady who is infallible, by the eighth Imam even before her wafat, before her passing away from this world. So with the use of the word Ma'asuma by none other than the Ma'asum Imam himself is indicating the lofty and excellent status of this noble lady whom we commonly call as Ma'asuma al-Qum. And our discussion was to look at three different questions. The first question was with regards to the word Ma'asum, Isma', its meaning, and Ma'asum. And the second question was to look with regards to the person who has been given this status, this lutf, this grace from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala of becoming infallible, of not committing any sins, not giving any misguidance or falling into error as such. This person, a male, is called a ma'asum and a lady is a ma'asuma. The second question was to look at when that person has now become a ma'asum or is born as a ma'asum from their birth to the time of the departure from this world, the ma'asum or the ma'asuma, with regards to the performance of the deeds on this earth, are they ones who become restricted in performing their deeds? And you recall we responded to that question by giving a typical example of participation in the naturist clubs. And we said that we do not move around in our natural birthday clothes, nor do we become members of these naturist clubs, for a simple reason that although it is possible for us to do that, yet we find that it is below our sanity, it is below our dignity, it is below our respect to do that. So we are protecting ourselves. Having given that example, we looked at the higher example of the person who has been given this grace, this lutf, becoming much more closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the ma'rifah, the recognition, and in the ilm, the knowledge, and the taqwa, and the God consciousness. For them, they become of that level that they would not even think or commit of doing these deeds of misguidance or error or sins as such. And that is where we say that the ma'asum or the ma'asuma are not confined in carrying out their deeds as such. Rather, they have the same free will which you and I have. The only difference is that they have a greater level of ma'rifah by which they protect themselves not to become of a lower level as such. Today, inshallah, we are going to look at the third question. The third question is that why is there need for the divine leaders, be it the Rasul, the messengers, or the Imams, to become ma'asum or ma'asuma? What is it that it becomes necessary for the Prophet or the Imam to become ma'asum? In other words, very simply, what is the rationale for us to always accept and be confident that the leader who has been divinely appointed by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is a ma'asum, and as a result of that leader becoming infallible, we just follow him, what we would say in our everyday languages, a blind following. So we just follow him and submit to all the instructions for the simple reason that that person is a ma'asum. Why is there a need for that? To be able to respond to this third question, the need or the rationalization for the divinely appointed leader to become a ma'asum, we first need to understand that what was the purpose for creation of human beings by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Was it because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wanted to just do something in vain? Was it because it was some sort of a pastime? He has created the earth, he has created the trees, he has created the waters to run, the birds were flying, and now there's a little bit of pastime, add some more color to it and create human beings and put them onto the earth? Is that the rationale? Is that the reason for human beings, you and I, to be created on this earth? Where do we get the answer from? We as people of faith, we get the answer from the Quran itself, where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is pointing to us in a very rhetorical question, telling us in Surah Al-Mu'minun, ayah number 115, أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم أفحسبتم أَنَّمَا خَلَقْنَاكُمْ عَبَثًا. Oh people, do you think that we have created you in vain? Do you think that we have created you for no purpose? There is nothing for which there was a purpose for creating you? And the ayah says, وَأَنَّكُمْ إِلَيْنَا لَا تُرْجَعُونَ. And do you think that you will not be returned to us? So it is actually a rhetorical question to draw our attention to two very significant points over here. The first point is that take it out of your mind that this was just in vain, that it was just a game for our creation. There is definitely a purpose when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is telling us, do you think that you were created in vain? No, you have been created for a purpose. That's the first significant point. And the second significant point over here is, وَأَنَّكُمْ إِلَيْنَا لَا تُرْجَعُونَ. Do you think that I'm going to return? The answer for that is definitely no. That the fact you're being asked that you think you're not going to return means that you are indeed going to return to us. So we are all agreeing that there is a purpose for which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has created us onto this earth. So now we need to know that if we have been created for something and not in vain, and we also need to understand that we are going to be returned to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, how is it? Are we going to lead our lives on this temporal world over here? And how is it that we are going to prepare ourselves to be in that condition fit to be able to meet Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? Sallu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. So who tells us about living your life on this world? Who tells us about preparing yourself so that you are of that condition, willing to be accepted into the audience of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala when you return? Who tells us that this is the one which is going to give you the pleasure of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and this is the one which you need to refrain upon, because that is going to damage you and put you into a bad state when you're going to meet with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? And the answer to that is given by none other than Amir al-Mu'mineen Ali ibn Abi Talib salawatullahi wa salamu alayhi. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad al Muhammad in Nahj al-Balagha khutbah number 1, where in detail he talks about the creations and the purpose of the creation. And thereafter he talks about the sending of the messengers, the divine guides. And he mentions that one of the roles of the sending of the messengers of the divine guides is to be able to remind the abd, the worshippers, the slaves of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that there is a promise, there is a pledge which you have given, and you need to uphold that pledge. What is that pledge? Amir al-Mu'mineen reminds us, which you all recite in Surah Yasin. Alam ahad ilaykum ya bani Adam. Did we not take a pledge from you, O the son of Adam? Whom is he addressing? You and I. What is that pledge? How will we come to know about it? And la ta'budu shaitan, that you will not serve, you will not worship, you will not obey, you will not follow the path of shaitan. Why? Innahu lakum aduwwun mubin. Know that he is indeed your sworn manifest enemy. So Amir al-Mu'mineen is pointing out to us that to remind us the pledge which we had given to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and also to draw our attention of the omnipotency of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the power, the malakut of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala regarding all these ayat of creations which we see around us, is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala out of his rahmah, his generosity, in his mercy, the one who is the most al-alim, the most learned, the hakim, the one who is the most wise, does not leave us just like that, but he sends the divinely appointed messengers in the form of the Prophet and the Imam alayhi salam. So now we have established that for us to be able to lead our lives into this world with fruition and meet Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, because we are going to be returned to him, we need to be taught or told how to lead our lives. And that is going to be through the prophets and the Aima alayhim salam. So now comes a further understanding of what is going to be our relationship between us and those divinely appointed guides whom Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has sent to us in the form of the prophets and the imams. Is that a relationship which is going to be for us to choose, where we can decide we will now follow it this time and decide we will not follow it this time, or we decide we do not need this advice and decide we need this advice, or we want to change that advice based on our likings and times and ages as such? Again, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the one who is the Hakim, the most wise, points out to us what needs to be the type of the relationship, what is going to be the contract of relationship between us and the guides, that is the prophets and the imams which he has sent. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. So we find in numerous verses in the Quran on several instances with regards to the contract of relationship which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is pointing out. And the first one is the ayah with which we commence the Majlis. وَمَا أَرْسَلْنَا مِن رَسُولٍ إِلَّا لِيُطَاعَ بِإِذْنِ اللَّهِ Surah An-Nisa. That Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is pointing out. وَمَا أَرْسَلْنَا, we have not sent a messenger except that لِيُطَاعَ إِطَاعَةً, that you must obey by the will of Allah, by the permission of Allah. A very important word. And that is the catalyst in that contract of relationship between us and the Prophet and the Imam alayhi salam. In other words, Ya ayyuhalladhina amanu, O you who believe, ati'u Allah wa ati'u Rasul wa ulil amri minkum. You see that important word? Ita'a being mentioned. And then he says, Ya ayyuhalladhina amanu, O you who believe, obey Allah, obey the messenger, and those who have been charged, vested in authority from amongst you. So here it means that this is being pointed out to us. If in any way we will not fulfill this operative word, ita'a, we will not be from the group of Ya ayyuhalladhina amanu, of those who believe. Third verse, وَمَا آتَاكُمُ الرَّسُولُ فَخُذُوهُ. How much more deeper it is pointing out the relationship, the contract of obedience. وَمَا آتَاكُمُ الرَّسُولُ. Whatever the Prophet gives you, فَخُذُوهُ, take it. Whether he gives you by words, whether he gives you by assent of action, or whether he gives you by action itself. فَخُذُوهُ, take it. You have no choice. وَمَا نَهَاكُمْ عَنْهُ فَانْتَهُ. And whatever he asks you to refrain from, whatever he forbids you from, be far away from it. The fourth ayah, Ya ayyuhalladhina amanu ati'u Allah. Again repeats, Alladhina amanu, the level of the believers. For you and I to be believers, we require ati'u Allah, obey Allah, wa ati'u Rasul, and obey the messenger. And look at now the greater twist Allah has brought in for us in that contract where he says, وَلَا تُبْتِلُوا أَعْمَالَكُمْ, and do not make your deeds become batil, become vain. Implying that one of the things which is very easily going to make our deeds become batil is when one ignores the introduction of this ayah, and that is obedience to the Prophet and obedience to the messenger. So a sign of Iman is ita'a to Allah, ita'a to the Rasul. And then the other ayah, وَمَنْ يُطِعِ الرَّسُولِ فَقَدْ أَطَاعَ اللَّهِ. And whosoever does ita'a of the messenger, of the Rasul, of the Prophet, فَقَدْ أَطَاعَ اللَّهِ, he is indeed obeyed Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. These are just 5 of those selected in numerous verses of the Quran with regards to ita'a, and pointing out that the contract of relationship is such that there is no choice. Obey the messenger, and obedience to the messenger is like one who has done the ita' of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And for the acceptance of your deeds, one needs to do ita' of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. In other words, without obedience to the messenger, the divinely appointed leaders, without in any way obedience to them, one is easily going to fall out that group of mu'mineen, the group of the followers or the believers over there. So this by itself is pointing out a very important point in the contract of relationship between us and the Prophet, and that is whatever he gives you, whatever he tells you, you have to do ita'ah, you have to do obedience, and you have to accept it, because this is the level which is going to be acceptable of your deeds. Without that, it is making your deeds to become vain. So imagine if there were a society where a person comes and he claims, or he addresses the people and he says that he is a prophet. And he shows to you performing of all the good deeds, all right? So for example, performing the salah, performing the sawm, taking care of the neighbors, but it turns out that he speaks lies. If that person claims to be the prophet, he does all these which is mentioned in the Quran, accepting the, performing the salah, doing the psalm, carrying out the other deeds, and he is failing on the truthfulness of his words, we would be left in a dilemma. What is the dilemma? The dilemma is the Quran is telling us that whoever is a Rasul, you have nothing except to follow him. Whoever is a Rasul, for your deeds to be accepted, you have to follow him. Whoever is a Rasul, you have to follow him, then you will be fulfilling your Iman. So we are in a dilemma for this person. If we are to not follow in all his deeds and just choose partly following, that means we will not be fulfilling the contract of relationship between us and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for those who are going to be our leaders. So we decide, okay, we'll follow him in salah, we will follow him in song, we follow him in being good with the neighbors. But when he's talking about lying, because we understand that this is a universal principle, lying is very bad universally, we're not going to follow him, then we will not be fulfilling, we'll just be choosing part follower to that thing. That means we're not following that contract. On the other hand, if you want to say, let us follow him completely, all right? So we follow the salah, we follow the song, we are good with the neighbors, and we follow him completely by lying because he is a prophet, he's telling us to lie. And Allah has pointed out that you have to follow whatever the prophet tells you. But in another verse of the Quran, he talks about how sinful is lying. Then we're in a dilemma. Shall we follow that verse of the Quran itself which is telling us how sinful is lying? Or shall we follow these verses of the Quran which tell us 100% obedience to the Prophet? And then leave it to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to blame him. You are the one who told us to follow 100% of the Prophet, and we are left in a situation where we could not take the decision of partly following as such. In that wisdom of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that is why he has made the divinely appointed leaders to be ma'asum. The fact that they are now going to be ma'asum out of their level of ma'rifah, recognition of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, their level of taqwa, the closeness to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, they will protect themselves and be on that level that they will never do anything which is going to be the disobedience to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And you and I, because we are fully convinced that the leader is a ma'asum, will follow the Quran where he says 100% obedience, put into our iman, acceptance of our amal, and that is the rationale for the need or the necessity for the leaders to be ma'asum. The fact that the leader is going to be ma'asum, the Prophet is going to be ma'asum, and by extension the Imam is going to be ma'asum, it makes us much more confident that this is the message and we are not at all going to tinker with it. And that is where we find within the Muslim community, within the Ummah, the wider Muslim community, which does not believe in the isma, that is the infallibility of the prophets, you can see that at times when the incidents about the life of the prophet is talked about, when incident about the previous prophets is talked about, immediately by reading it, one comes to a thought, it seems like he's behaving like a very ordinary man like us. Much worse than the ordinary man. So when you hear of the story of Nabi Musa alayhi salam having a bath, going to the river, having a bath, or removing his clothes, becoming naked, and some people are watching him, and then Shaitan comes and steals the clothes over there, and this becomes a joke and people laugh. Is this how the Prophet of Allah is going to be? By the way, this is not from our book. It's from the book of the Ahl Sunnah. So to able to give us that confidence at all times that indeed we are on a very strong, firm, sound footing. No jolting is going to be able to shake that message, and jolting is going to shake the character of the leaders as such. That is why it is necessary for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to point out to us that in our contract of relationship between us and the guides, that is the Imam and the Prophets, the necessity is that they have got to be ma'asum. So this is finally the third question which you answered today, that there is need for us to be able to always have the leader of the Prophet, the leader of the Imam, the Prophets themselves and the Imams to be ma'asum. And as a result of that, we are always confident that inshallah, with the message being given to us from the Quran and the interpretations of the Hadith, subject to the authentication of the Hadith, we are confident that this is a guidance from none other than the Ma'asum. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. So with this, inshallah, we are brought to a tie or completion of the introduction with the use of the word Ma'asum. And finally, with regards to the need of the Ma'asum, and perhaps you may be wondering, a question which comes to mind is with regard to Nabi Adam alayhi salam. Was that a scene which was performed when there was an instruction given, and commonly people understand it that there was a tree which was the apple tree, and I failed to understand till today were apples in Jannah at that time. So just for your information, it was not an apple tree. Right? Let's be sure for that it's not an apple tree, but there's a greater discussion whether the ayah of the Quran which is talking about Nabi Adam alayhi salam, did Nabi Adam alayhi salam perform a scene with this introduction which is given. So there's no exception, but that is a topic by itself, as what is the deed about Nabi Adam alayhi salam, which inshallah Allah gives tawfiq, we will be able to discuss it at a later moment. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. We now come to the occasion of the wafat of our 11th Imam Hassan al Askari salawatullahi wa salamu alayhi. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Before I link it to the conversation of Arba'in, and the reason why I've chosen Arba'in, if you remember when we started the Majlis, I mentioned that formally within our Husseiniya, the centers of Azadari, today would be the last Majlis of observing the Azadari as such. And I feel it's very appropriate to link it to the Azadari of Arba'in. So before I come to that discussion of the Azadari of Arba'in, let's just look at a little bit about the life of the Imam himself, especially in that very short period of Imamat which he had. To the best of my understanding, this Imam had the very short period of Imamat, the office of leadership on this world. In the year 236 after Hijrah, the Imam was 4 years old. And his father, that is the 10th Imam, Ali al-Naqi salawatullahi wa salamu alayhi, Allahumma salli ala Muhammadin wa ali Muhammad, was summoned by the tyrant Abbasid ruler at the time by the name of Mutawakkil to go to Samarra. At that time, Samarra was now the capital of the Muslim Commonwealth. So Imam, the father and the son, together with some of the family members, moved from Medina in the year 236 AH to go to Samarra. And we know that how the life was in Samarra. How a lot of the time they were in detention, put not only into house detention, but also put into deep dungeons. For those who have gone for Ziyarat, if you have missed out previously, make a point, inshallah, when you get a tawfiq to go next time when visiting Samarra. Just on the road for the haram, not very far, you will see a sign which is pointing towards the prison of the Imam. And it is a terrible place, the dungeon, if you see for itself. The first time I saw it was on a video itself. And the second time we made a point to see that sign. Very terrible, believe me. But now they have made some, what we say, paths to go down, a lot of ventilation and so on. Person is able to go. This ruler, Abbasid ruler, Mutawakkil, was the brutal, extreme brutal of the time, such that history records him as the Yazid of the Banu Abbas. The way the Yazid of the Banu Umayyah 61 after Hijrah, Karbala, and then after Karbala, the ransacking of Medina, and then after that, the onslaught to go towards Mecca. That deeds which Yazid did was not only the family but also the sacred places. Mutawakkil could not be left behind, and history calls him as the Yazid of the Banu Abbas, the family of the Banu Abbas. Some of the terrible things which he did was he selected the Alawid families, the grandchildren from the line of Imam Ali alayhi salam, and ensured that they would get an economic blockade. To such hurting that economic blockade was for them that the women folk had only one cloth to use either for prayers or to use for the hijab. And if people were seen to be able to go and give food or help the Alawids at that time, strict punishment would be given for them in breaking this economic blockade upon the Alawids at that time. This was one of the things which he did. The second thing which he did was he imposed severe restrictions for performing ziyarah to the heaven on earth, Karbala al-Mu'alla. Severe taxes were put. Severe taxes not only in kind, in wealth, but taxes for parents to sacrifice the heads of the children, or for parents to give the limbs of the children, either an arm or a leg. The mother could go for ziyarah, for example. But still, the ziyarah of Abu Abdullah Islam did not stop. And then he brought another strategy. And that was, he started diverting the flow of the river at that time so that the land of Karbala al-Mu'alla could be flooded over, and he arranged for the plows or the animals to plow along that land over there. But yet, the signs of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the water knew their directions and the animal knew their directions, and the sacred spaces on that place, heaven on earth, would remain intact. That was the Yazid of the Banu Abbas, Mutawakkil at that time. But history, as I always tell you, and this is something I constantly tell us, that history is not there to be kept in the history's books. It's very important for us to know the past so that we can chart our direction in the future. And this is what Shaitan does not want us to think about. And this is what the forces of imperialism, capitalism, secularism, atheism, and that society will not want us to remember our history so that we do not chart our path. So what history has shown us, the restriction for ziyarat at that time is not confined to those historical books. Even today, we see that now there are what we will say not brutal or extreme ways for stopping mu'minin to go to the heaven on earth for the ziyarah to Karbala al-Mu'alla, but smart, intelligent methods to discourage mu'minin to go to the ziyarah of Abu Abdullah. So I would like to share with you one smart way being utilized intellectually to create lowerness of the zeal to go for the ziyarah of Abu Abdullah. And what is that thing? We know the hadith of our 11th Imam Hassan al Askari salawatullahi wa salamu alayhi, Allahumma salli ala Muhammad, where he points out to us that there are 5 signs, alamatul mu'min. 5 signs for a believer. And interestingly, you know, I really look at the blessing Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the hikmah, that Imam Hassan al Askari is the one who would be the most closest in time to us compared to the time of 6th Imam, who speaks about ziyarah of Abu Abdullah. But despite the restricted moments which Imam Hassan al Askari passed, yet in those alamat of the mu'mineen, the 5 signs of the believers, the 5th sign he mentioned was Ziyaratul Arba'in. Can you please repeat? Ziyaratul Arba'in. Remember the word Ziyaratul Arba'in, which very commonly, ask any person who don't know Arabic, you'll understand ziyarah from Urdu, from Farsi, from Gujarati. Ziyarah means Commonly, the Ziyarat, the traveling to go for Ziyarat. Arba'in, commonly from our childhood, the 20th of Safar, the 40th day of Abu Abdullah Hussain. So tonight, being the wafat of the 11th Imam, link this hadith to what I'm talking about, the smart intellectual ways, where the Imam, the closest one to our time, despite the restrictions and the torment he went in that time, yet he pointed out for us, for a believer, one of your signs is the Ziyarat of Arba'in. So what is the smart intellectual way of being able to dissuade people to not to go to the heaven on earth, Karbala al-Mu'alla? They say that when the Imam was talking about the signs of the believer, the signs of the mu'mineen, amongst one of the signs, the Ziyarat Arba'in, what is actually meaning is not going on 20th Safar to Karbala al-Mu'alla, but he actually means is visiting Arba'in, 40 mu'mineen. In the context of that hadith, that the sign of a believer, all right, in the context of that hadith, he mentioned 5 signs, out of which the 5th sign is, astaghfirullah, this is the interpretation which is being floated around, that is the 5th sign is visiting 40 believers, Arba'in mu'mineen. That is the sign of the believer. What this immediately applies? Belittle, very subliminally, that Ziyaratul Arba'in. So how do you refute that argument? They see for themselves that this Ziyaratul Arba'in is indeed a very, very powerful mobilization of the people. And the people get mobilized not because they are suffering. You know, usually when will people go on demonstrations? People go on demonstrations when they are deprived of something. Isn't it? You will hear, for example, when the prices go up, then they're going to a demonstration because they've been deprived of some living expense. But people go for this huge demonstration of the humanity of sea of humanity, not because we have been deprived of anything. Rather, we put in ourselves, all right, and offer comfort, the ziyafa to others. Let us all go for the ziyarah of Arba'in. More than 20 million was clocked by Ataba of Abul Fadl Abbas alayhi salam from this time for this Ziyarat Arba'in. Add to that the number of people who in their own lands, in their own mosque, in their own homes on the day of Arba'in still stood and spiritually connected with the heaven on earth, Karbala al-Mu'alla, to show their pledge to Abu Abdullah Hussain alayhi salam. A huge, powerful army of Imam al-Asr, Sahib al-Asri wa Zaman, being mobilized, isn't it? Sallu ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. And if this huge, powerful army, if Imam al-Asr is mobilized, what does that mean? There's going to be justice. There's going to be fairness. And this is against the system. This is against the so-called authorities and the system by itself. Read between the lines what I'm talking about, the authority and the system. So how do they poke holes into it and then they dissuade us or belittle this year of Arba'in for us? This is the way. Bring the link of the faithfuls with their leaders. Remember, the destruction of Jannatul Baqi on Yawm Gham is not because of any reason. Break that link. They could not bear it. If the same happens to Karbala al-Mu'alla, just imagine, the link is broken. People don't go for ziyarah. It's much difficult to go for ziyarah to Jannatul Baqi, difficult to go for ziyarah to Uhud. Then it is easier to go for ziyarah of Abu Abdullah alayhi salam. So break the link with the leadership. Leadership is the living Imam in his ghaiba. Leadership is the Maraji Idam and the Ulama Kiram. Make the community feel we don't need ulama, we don't need an Imam. All of us. Don't you think we are capable now to do research on Sheikh Google? Doesn't Masail tell us that if 2 people are there, do namaz Jamaat, we need somebody to lead us in Jamaat? There's no need. Slowly, the termite enters into the structure of the community and then break their link with Abu Abdullah. These 3 things, Azadari, the Marja'iyah, ulama kiram and maraji idam. Break this link. So how do we respond it to these termites which are entering into our faith in a smart and intellectual way? And I remember, it is on this night today, the wafat of our 11th Imam, who is the one who emphasized of Ziyarat al-Arba'in, not in that smart way that go and visit 40 mu'minin, but the Ziyarah of Arba'in, that is the 20th of Abu Abdullah. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. So, here are some few ways of how we are going to refute this misleading thought, how we are going to kill out this termite entering into our iman. The first one is with regards to Arabic language. In Arabic language, articles can be either specific nakira, or they can be either can be general, that is nakira, or specific, that is ma'rifah. So to make an article to become specific ma'rifah, you need to add the letter al. So for example, we have kitab. Kitab is a book. So it is any general book. But the moment we add al, alif lam, al-kitab, and I mention al-kitab, what comes to your mind is a specific book, the book. Which is that book? The Quran. When we say bayt, house, but when we say al-bayt, the house, what comes to your mind is no ordinary house. That is the bayt of Allah, Kaaba. So likewise, when we look at the hadith of the 11th Imam, when he is talking about alamatul mu'min khamsa, that is the sign of the mu'min is 5, and I'm leaving out those 4 other signs, just mentioning the one for our discussion today, and that is ziyaratul arba'in, al-arba'in, the 40, the 40th. So it is specifying something, the 40. So this is one point of being able to refute this argument. The second point of refuting his argument is that when we look at history, on the 20th of Safar, in the year 62 after Hijrah, what took place? Jabir bin Abdullah al-Ansari, the most loyal and trusted companion of our beloved Prophet. And also on that day, the freed captives of Karbala arrived from Sham on their way to Medina, and they arrived in Karbala. What did they do? They performed visitation, ziyarah. It was not just a visitation, it was actually a ziyarah which they performed over there. They could have gone directly from Sham to go to Karbala, to go to Medina. They had suffered so much. But they went because there was a specific reason. The reason is becoming unraveled day by day for you and I today. Otherwise, there would have been a chapter closed. So it is being unraveled for us today that the second reason for refuting this argument is that it is a historical fact that on the 20th of Safar in the year 62 after Hijrah, an event took place which was performed by Jabir bin Abdullah al-Ansari and the 4th Imam Ali ibn al-Hussein together with Sayyida Zainab alayhi salam. So doesn't it call for us as part of our practices of Azadari to follow in the steps of these noble personalities and perform that same ziyarah, and that is the ziyarah of Arba'in. This is the second point of refuting this argument. The third point for refuting this argument is that mu'mineen, we know reliable records of ahadith have been mentioned right from the time of the 6th Imam, where they are not only pointing out the actual text, the narrative of what is to be recited on the Arba'in on the 20th of Safar, but they are also pointing out the method of performing the ziyarah, and in addition to that, they are pointing out the significance and excellences. Haven't we read that when that Zaheer arrives in Karbala, there is a group of angels who are assigned to welcome him and host him? Haven't we read that a record is made of those who have entered Karbala for the ziyarah, and if that person were to die, those angels will come for the time of the Sakaratul Maut and at the time of the Tashiyah of Janazah for that person? Haven't we heard that performing the ziyarah of Arba'in is like doing the ziyarah of Arsh of Allah? Haven't we heard the hadith which talks about performing the ziyarah of Arba'in is leading to the forgiveness of sins? How many more fadail comes over there? For what? For a specific point, and that is the 20th of Safar, the Arba'in. And likewise, if it was for the visiting of 40 mu'mineen, we have hadith from the Prophet, we have hadith from the Imams alayhi salam who talk about the excellencies of visiting mu'mineen. But those hadith, with due respect, are in no way comparable or matching to these hadiths of the ziyarah of Abu Abdullah. Why are people making fool of us and telling us that go and visit those 40 mu'mineen and you'll get this thawab over there? You think the Imam were, astaghfirullah, wasting time in just giving narration separately for visiting mu'mineen and narration separately for doing the ziyarah of Abu Abdullah on the 20th of Safar? There was a reason. That is why they give separate narrations for visiting mu'mineen and separate narrations for the ziyarah of Arba'in. So mu'mineen, this is the third argument, that please look at the fadila, look at the ahadith specifically mentioning that separate deed, intellectual smart understanding, and this actual deed, and that is the ziyarah to Jannah, to Karbala al-Mu'alla. And the fourth reason for refuting this argument is we see for ourselves in history, mu'mineen, that there are some deeds which have been so entrenched into our faith that they are considered to be the sha'airullah. These are the signs of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Doesn't the Quran mention that the hills or the mountains of Safa and Marwa are considered to be sha'airullah? That is, that they are the signs which reminds you about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Don't the ahadith mention to us that the Eid of Ghadir is such an important Eid that the heaven, the inhabitants of the heavens know more about its significance and celebrations than the inhabitants of the earth? So that is because it is a symbol, an important symbol, a sha'air of Islam, which reminds of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And what does the Maraji tell us when they talk about Azadari? When they talk about Azadari, they exhort us to form the discipline. They exhort us to participate in the various deeds of Azadari. And they tell us that every time, keep alive the mission of Azadari. And they also remembered mentioning the ayah, وَمَنْ يُعَظِّمْ شَعَائِرَ اللَّهِ, and whosoever honors the symbols of Allah, فَإِنَّهَا مِنْ تَقْوَى الْقُلُوبِ, then that person is from taqwa al-qulub. He is certainly the one who is out of the piety of his iman. So likewise, over the years, how many years is it now? Imam Sadiq alayhi salam talked about Arba'in. You can think of the number of years, and today we are in 1444. So at least it's more than 1300 years, isn't it? 1300 years. Ghadir, how many years? Took place in the year 10 after Hijrah. 1430 years at least. And it is a sign, it is a symbol of the madhab of Ahlul Bayt. The sign, the truth of Islam. So hold steadfast to this thing. So over the years, the ziyarah of Arba'in, there was a reason for it, so that it entrenches and becomes one of the sha'airullah and becomes one of the importance of symbols of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And tell me yourself, for those of you who have gone for the ziyarah of Arba'in alayhi salam, for those of you who have gone for the ziyarah of any ma'asum, doesn't the presence in the haram of that ma'asum make you feel so much detached and greater, much more aware of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? So link it to Abu Abdullah on the day of Arba'in. Shouldn't this ayah be the one that this is the one who is actually respecting that sha'air of Allah, that symbol of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and proving his iman and taqwa to that? So these are the 4 points, mu'mineen, for us to be able to think about refuting this thing. And remember, with this ziyarah arba'in is not only the recitation of the text. Now with the ulama and the maraji, even mentioning and promoting the mashi, that is the walking from Najaf to Karbala, and mu'mineen walk from different parts of Iraq, from Iran and other places, to be able to perform this. In Arabic, it is mentioned, minan nahar ila al-bahr. It is from the streams, it is from the springs that all these waves of humanity come towards the Bahar, and that is the ocean, which is the heaven on earth. It's not a sight to behold, which will give happiness to the so-called system, the Taghut and the Zalimin. So they need to have strategies to be able to dissuade the mu'minin. And one of these was the smart strategy, which I mentioned. The other strategy which they have, I know my time is up, mu'minin, but today is the last day for Raza. Give me that moment, I request you. Next 5 minutes, and we'll finish, inshallah. The other strategy which they use is to be able to ignore this situation. And you can see for yourself how the world's largest media choose to ignore a huge gathering, more than 20 million people gathering over there. Peaceful gathering, hospitality, variety of treatment and services being given, but being chosen to ignore. And the other day, when the people were lining up to go and view with respect the state viewing funeral of the Queen, the little bit of services which was being given of hot tea or using of those extra food and sandwiches to be given to the food banks and so on was being highlighted locally in the media over here, compared to that huge 20 million people gathered over there. The day Kardashian changes her dress and her home address in Beverly Hills, it makes news in the world. You and I come to know about it. And remember, our children are following this. TikTokers, they know about these influencers. They know about these influencers. That's why it's very important, mu'minin. Make your presence on these social forums. Use it in this way so that you pump out your message. So the first strategy they do is ignore it. And it is working. For them, it is working. It's coming about. But because the mimbar is the one which is reminding the mu'minin, the fadail, the excellence, the thawab, and mobilization, we all rush and revive these practices. That's the first strategy they use. The second strategy they do is just like Mutawakkil did, create insecurity, taxis, chop off their limbs. So today you find, and I've been noticing it, probably I'm wrong, but I'm asking you to help me out in my research. I've been noticing it day by day. As Rubaina draws closer in the land of Iraq, you will find political turmoil being brought about. And what happens? Hey Baba, apne jao je, atbo damal sai chete. Do you think we should go? There's political turmoil over there. Even this time also, political turmoil was there. MashaAllah, people went and they'll come. But it has an effect, isn't it? So this is the second strategy which these so-called systems use, and that is create political turmoil. The third strategy they use is bringing about what they would call as substitutes. So for example, substitutes, you'll see hadith which tells us about the day of Ashura. The day of Ashura is very important to fast, because that is the day when Nabi Musa alayhi salam managed to free the Banu Israel. The day of Ashura, very important to fast, because it is the day when the ark of Nabi Nuh alayhi salam was saved. And so many hadiths replace substitute. These are hadiths from the Ahl Sunnah, by the way. They have no basis. All right? So then these substitutes come around, and slowly it mixes within us, and we hear this thing around. So bring about substitutes. And here, an example of substitute. What is the substitute? Instead of the Ziyarat of Arba'in, visit 40 believers. Substitute. Smart way. All right? Substitute out. This is the third strategy, to be able to weaken that link. The fourth strategy is, unfortunately, ridiculing the people. During the time of Shah-Reza Pahlavi, people who wanted, the women who wanted to go out and do their practices, just like what Quran tells us to put on the hijab, they were being ridiculed. Not only being ridiculed, so-called state police were there to forcefully remove their hijab. Men with beards being ridiculed. Even today, of course, nowadays it has become a fashion to pick up beard for a large number of people, because models are putting that beard. I pray to Allah that we who keep beard have that ikhlas. We're not doing it because we saw the model on the television. We have these good models nowadays. I pray to Allah, it's not because you keep that beard because of a model doing that. I pray to Allah, we do that because it is the sunnah of the Prophet. So when you do the sunnah of the Prophet, please follow the Marsia have told us how to keep the beard. Refresh your masails regarding the keeping of the beard. So, the third strategy the fourth strategy we do about is ridiculing. So just like this aspect, the example I gave you, ridicule the women with the hijab, ridicule the men with the beard, ridicule the mu'mineen who go for the ziyarah and say, don't you think they're going for holidays? Look at them, the way they are moving around and stamping their feet and so on. Astaghfirullah. Haven't you heard the word carnival being said in these very members of our community? To ridicule. And then those clips are circulated closer to the time of Muharram because those very speakers till today have not given a clarification that what they meant, do not stand by it. They have not given. Had they given clarifications, then those clarification videos would have been put into greater circulation till today. Am I right? Have I seen any clarification? I, to my best of my knowledge, I want. I still hear the word carnival. This is the fourth one. Ridicule this thing. The fifth one is bring about academic reinterpretation. So start questioning. Yes, this was there in Kamilu Ziyarat by Ibn Kulaway. But do you know whether it is Sahih or not? Don't you think it means actually visiting 40 mu'minin in the context which Imam Hassan al Askari said, Ziyar, the signs of a mu'min. So in that context, 40 mu'minin. Or bring about questioning today when the world is suffering. Pakistan, 2/3 of the land is underwater. Do you think we should be going for the Ziyarah for paying all that expense? Shouldn't we give to these relief efforts? I think this question was dealt very nicely in a previous Majlis. That whilst we will also support those activities of relief in the way of Abu Abdullah, but there might be times when it becomes very necessary and wajib for an individual to perform that ziyarah for his own personal tazkiyatun nafs. So these are some 5 strategies to be able to create that link or weaken that link between the community, the Imam of our time, his ghaiba, the azadari, the maraja idam, and the ulama ikram. And mu'mineen, I've been mentioning this regularly in the Jummah khutbah, that in today's time, to be able to destroy a community, one does not need to do extreme actions of murdering them. There has been evidence that if you want to destroy the steadfastness of a community, for 15 years, expose that generation to some values, and you will find that they will wither out with their original values and take in the values to which they are exposed. So you can imagine if for 15 years, this reinterpretation of 40 mu'mineen, or this reinterpretation of carnival, or this reinterpretation of being it Zaheer, or this reinterpretation, we don't need to do this, we are moving with the times, the Zadar has got to be with the times, and so on. For 15 years as such, the whole thing will go away. Remember, what I'm speaking about is not actually meant for us as adults. We have to be careful today to keep the door very, very secure so that we leave a legacy for our children. And this is why I'm reminding that mu'mineen, Imam Hassan al Askari in terms of timing is the one who is the closest of the Imam. He is emphasizing with regards to this year. Do not underestimate these things, mu'mineen. Allah is giving us the opportunity to be able to carry out rehearsals and drills so that we can get mobilized. That is why do not underestimate that walk of mourning grief around this Al-Mahdi center on the day of Ashura and the day of Arba'in. There is a strategy which I have in mind, mu'mineen. The strategy is, from here on, these children love coming from their homes with the flags because we want these limbs and muscles to start getting used to it. So by the time you as parents tell them we go for ziyarah, it is now the real ziyarah. You know that small lap which you did in Al-Mahdi is going to be the real ziyarah. You will find your children have got used to it. And they'll go over there. And inshallah, when the actual call comes that now the faraj has taken place, because these limbs have got used to this, these eyes and ears have got used to it, inshallah, we will respond, Labbaik ya Hussein, Sallu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Mu'mineen, tonight being the wafat of our 11th Imam, I would just like to mention to you that when our 11th Imam had been sent together with his father to go to Samarra. The life for the 11th Imam was not an easy one in Samarra. The brutal Mutawakkil, so brutal he was that Mu'mineen, when I mentioned to you with regards to all those 3 strategies which he has done, a time came when the Imam, when he was the age of 28 years, on a night like today, on the 8th of Rabi al-Awwal, in the year 260 after Hijrah, he passed away from this world. Mu'mineen, from our 12 Imams, we have 2 Imams who have 2 things in common with them. These 2 Imams are the 2nd Imam and the 11th Imam. What is common between these 2 Imams? One thing which is common between these 2 Imams is both of them have the same name and the same names of their father. The 2nd Imam is called Imam Hassan bin Ali al-Mujtaba, and the 11th Imam is called Imam Hassan bin Ali al-Askari. This is the first thing which is common between these 2 Imams. Listen to the second thing which is common between these 2 Imams. Both of these 2 Imams, Mu'mineen, passed away from this world. They faced martyrdom as a result of poison being suffered to them. Let me tell you with regards to the poison being served to the 2nd Imam, Hassan alayhi salam. History tells us that the poison which Muawiyah had ordered was brought from the foreign lands from Rome. And it was prepared to be such a strong one that when the Imam put it into his mouth, when he put the drink, it was so severe in its reaction that it attacked the internal organs of the Imam immediately, and they say that the vomit came out with parts of the liver being thrown out from the Imam at that time. And the close family members, Sayyidah Zainab and Abu Abdullah salam, were very close, and they saw for themselves their brother Imam Hassan alayhi salam withering in pain and hurting and vomiting as a result of that poison being given to him. And Imam Hassan alayhi salam looks lovingly at his brother and tells him, have patience, my dear brother. La yawm ka yawmaka ya Abu Abdullah. There is no day which is more severe than your day, O Abu Abdullah, the day of Ashura. This is the incident of the poison and the severeness and the strength of the poison being served to the 2nd Imam. Whereas for the poison being served to the 11th Imam, Mu'mineen, history tells us that it was a very different type of poison. This poison, when it was served to the Imam, it started taking its effect gradually for at least 8 days. For at least 8 days, the Imam was writhing in pain and moving and suffering on his bed for 8 days. Bring to your mind the way for Imam Hassan alayhi salam, his close family members were with him. Here for 8 days, the close family members were with him. And we can imagine that the Imam of our time, Sahib al-Asri was Zaman, who was 5 years old also, must have been close to the Imam, to his father, and comforting him at that time. What must have been going on in the heart of our Imam when he sees his father writhing in pain, not for a moment, not for 1 day, but for at least 8 days writhing in pain as a result of that poison, slowly attacking his body. Mu'mineen, our Imam of our time must have been watching his father this way. Let me tell you, there was another Imam who also saw his father being moved away from this world and martyred, and that was the 4th Imam, the great-great-grandfather of our present Imam, the 4th Imam, Ali ibn Hussein Zain al-Abidin. How did he see his father when the sound came? Ala qad qutila al-Husayn bi Karbala, ala qad dhubiha al-Husayn bi Karbala. Verily Hussein has been killed in Karbala. Verily Hussein has been martyred in Karbala. Imam Zainul Abidin alayhi salam looks out And do you know what he sees? He sees the head of his father being raised on a spear. And thereafter, the next day or in the evening, he sees the body of his father without his head being put aside. And the horses are trampling over the sacred body of Abu Abdullah alayhi salam. Oh Imam Zaman, we extend our condolences to you, and we know that you have said that you weep upon Abu Abdullah Hussein al-Islam every day. Ya Allah, we pray to you by the wasila of Ahlul Bayt alayhimus salam. Ya Allah, we pray to you especially by the wasila of the wafat of the Imam. For those who are not in good health, Ya Allah, grant them shafa'a ajil wa sihhati kamil. For all our marhumin from our family members, our friends, for the arwah of shuhada, the ulama kiram and muraji idam, Ya Allah, we pray to you. Grant them maghfirah and a'la daraja. Ya Allah, for the people who are suffering from the terrible effects of the climate, Ya Allah, the calamities, especially the people in Pakistan, the lower part of India and Bangladesh, and those who have suffered as a result of the typhoon, the hurricane in Florida. Ya Allah, we pray to you. Grant them that ease. Grant them that rahmah, inshallah, and protect us from the calamities of the weather. Ya Allah, for all the taghut and the zalimeen carrying out their various plans, make all their plans to become null and void and defeated at all times. Ya Allah, the mazlumeen, the mustad'afeen, the people who are suffering and oppressed in different parts of the world. Ya Allah, we pray to you, grant them that faraj, grant them the relief and comfort. Ya Allah, we pray for the protection and the good health and long life of all our ulama kiram and maraja idam, that they continue to guide us in these challenging moments of Ghaibatul Kubra. And we make a fervent dua, Ya Allah, on this day of the wafat of our Imam Hassan al Askari alayhi salam. Ya Allah, enable us, for those who have gone for the ziyarah, accept our efforts and grant us abundant of rewards. And we pray that you grant us the tawfiq to be able to remain steadfast to the ziyarah and continue in upholding ziyarah of Arba'in. Ya Allah, and we pray to you, enable us to be from those who are going to be the awan and the ansar of our Mawlana Sahib al-Asri wa Zaman, ajalahu farajahu sharif. Allahumma ajil dhuhurahu wa farajahu. And enable us to be from those who will say, Labbaik ya Hussein, Labbaik ya Mahdi, بحرمة سورة المباركة الفاتحة مع الصلوات. اللهم صل على محمد. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم.
زيارة. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. السلام عليك يا رسول الله. السلام عليك يا أمير المؤمنين يا سيد الوصين. السلام عليك يا فاطمة الزهراء سيدتي نساء العالمين. السلام عليك يا حسن المجتبى. السلام عليك يا أبا عبد الله الحسين، وعلى 9 المقسومين من ذريتك، علي بن الحسين ومحمد بن علي وجعفر بن محمد وموسى بن جعفر وعلي بن موسى ومحمد بن علي وعلي بن محمد والحسن بن علي والحجة بن الحسن القائم المنتظر المهدي، عجل الله تعالى فرجك وسهل الله تعالى مخرجك وظهورك. والسلام عليكم جميعا ورحمة الله وبركاته. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. اللهم كن لوليك حجة بن الحسن صلواتك عليه وعلى آبائه في هذه الساعة وفي كل ساعة وليا وحافظا وقائدا وناصرا ودليلا وعينا
حتى تسكنه أرضك وتمتعه فيها طويلا.